Good to see this one back. Pretty much an OG trendsetter. So a couple weeks ago, Michter's Distillery announced the return of its US1 toasted barrel finished bourbon, first introduced in 2014, last released in 2021. I always wonder if Michter's knew at the time the trend that they unleashed on the whiskey world, with distillers, NDPs, all together experimenting and releasing toasted whiskeys still to this day. Now, I'm sure an argument can be made that toasting barrels was happening prior to 2014, but let's face it, Michter's was the one that put it on the map, they mass marketed it, and some still say they're the ones who perfected it. So let's taste it. Compared to the 2024 Toasted Rye and also the 2021 edition of this bottle, and let's see if it's worth chasing this year right here on the Mash and Drum. What's up, folks? I'm Jason C. from the Mash and Drum, and welcome back to the show. Like, subscribe, and help me keep climbing to that 100,000 subscriber milestone. Appreciate the support. So as I mentioned, this was first released in 2014 after a good deal of research and experimentation. Michter's takes fully matured barrels of their US1 small batch bourbon, then they transfer that spirit to a second barrel made of 18-month air-dried wood that's undergone an hour of toasting over an open flame, but without any char. Now, in the past, I've always, as I was saying, in the past, I've always loved the toasted rye more than this one. However, the bourbon for me usually came off a bit youthful. It was, a little bit more smoky than sweet to me. There was some sweet, but not as much as I would have thought from a Michter's product. So this year, the whiskey is bottled at 91.4 proof with an SRP of $110 for a 750 milliliter bottle. I mean, it's crazy when you think about it. Let's see if I could do this. Since the introduction of this, there have been a multitude of toasted whiskeys. We have seen them from Elijah Craig. I mean, recently, Elijah Craig just came out with the toasted rye themselves at 94 proof. You have Penelope, you have K-Luke, you have Woodford Reserve, Basil Hayden, ASW, Starlight, Peerless, Yellowstone, and even Jack Daniels did a toasted whiskey. So the choices in this category these days are endless. All right, so let's dive in and see what the 2024 edition brings to the table. Here we go. Immediately up front, I get the toasty, almost campfire, bonfire-esque type of notes. I mean, if there's ever been a toasted bourbon that's had like the toasted marshmallow, graham cracker type note, then yeah, this is it. I'm actually thinking this is a little bit even sweeter than the 2021 edition, but we'll compare. I'm not really picking up that youthful note that I was getting, if I remember correctly. However, there's kind of like a smoked caramel type note here. The marshmallow's definitely there. There's some baking spice as well. Could probably make a case for a little nutmeg, little cinnamon here. But yeah, that barrel char, that little bit of a smokiness factor, it's kind of a sweet smoke, I think is really what stands out about the nose so far. So let's give it a try. Yeah, that is a toasted bourbon right there. Wow, very, very sweet. Almost decadent to a point where there's just so much sweetness happening, again, with the marshmallow, the graham cracker, the cinnamon. There's a great little spice kick on the very back end of this that I could appreciate. I hope it stays here as we go from sip to sip. Sometimes as you sip these low proofers, that tends to kind of drop off a little bit. It drops off a little bit. I feel like it's still there, but now I'm getting a little bit of a chocolate note that's coming to the forefront here. But that like smoked toffee note, smoked caramel note I was getting on the nose is so prevalent, even on the palate. Again, the toasted marshmallow note is there. Nice little spice. This seems to me a little bit sweeter than the last version. We'll pour that in a second. I just want to get probably one more sip of this one. Again, that 91.4 proof, I think, kind of holds this back a little bit for me. This bottle, along with some others, is pretty intriguing to me because I feel like it's geared towards more of a beginner palate because it is super easy to drink. It's a lower proof. It's very sweet. Has some nice toasted, enhanced like marshmallow notes. However, if you're kind of a seasoned whiskey drinker or bourbon drinking, you kind of veer towards those higher proof pours, then this one will probably get a little bit boring as you keep sipping it. Maybe use it as a dessert pour. However, I don't know. I feel like people that still love whiskey and go for high proofers will still try to track this one down just because of the history and the, you know, kind of the mystique around it. Yeah, this is a nice toasted bourbon. Again, I'm not the biggest toasted bourbon fan in the world, but if there is a quintessential toasted bourbon profile that brings you everything that toasted bourbon should, as far as a little bit of smokiness, toffee, caramel, toasted vanilla, marshmallow, graham cracker, so a little bit of spice in the end, then this is it. Let's compare it to the toasted rye and also the last toasted bourbon that was released. All right, so this is the Michter's Toasted Barrel from 2021. So let's do that comparison real quick before we get into the rye. It's the same proof point. You're still looking at 91.4 proof. So yeah, it's kind of what I remembered. It's a little bit more corn forward on the 21, a little bit brighter. I think the smokiness and you do get that toast profile, it's there. However, compared to the 24, yeah, the 24 is sweeter, it's darker. Now I know this one has been open and kind of oxidizing for a few years, so that may be playing into it. However, I mean, the difference is pretty stark. All right, let's try the 21. So the 21, I think gets close. However, there is a little bit more of a corn forwardness to it, a little bit more youthful on the palate. However, that smokiness that I'm getting on the 24 is there. That really sweet smoke note that's there with a little bit of like that smoked toffee note. Let's go back to 24. Yeah, I way prefer the 24. If you like the 21, the 24 is definitely gonna, I think, hit above that for you, just because it's a little bit darker, it's a little bit richer. I think they're both equally a little bit thin on the palate, unfortunately, but I do think the 24 has a better finish as well over the 21. I think there's a better spice accent on the very back end of the palate. Again, you get the cinnamon, a little bit of black pepper there. Again, a little bit of nutmeg too. More baking spice heavy, a little bit more chocolate than I'm getting in the 21. I think the 21 is actually more vanilla forward when you kind of go back and forth. 21 has way more of a heavy vanilla extract type thing going on, whereas the 24 is just a little bit deeper and richer overall. So for me, I like those deeper, richer, darker flavors. If you like the vanilla bombs, you might like the 21 better, but 24 is where it's at for me. All right, let's go to the toasted rye. Now this is 109.2 proof, and this is from 2023, I believe. Yes, it is. So last year. I really do wish they would do a toasted bourbon at barrel strength. I would love to try that. A barrel strength toasted, I think sometimes gets a little bit too tannic, a little bit too drying. And that's something I forgot to mention too. This is also a little bit drying on the back end every time I go back to it on the 24. I think that smokiness that you get does tend to dry your palate out a little bit on toasted bourbons in general, but I do feel like I'm getting that in the 24. Not as bad as some others though that I've tried, so I feel like it's, you know, you could deal with it a little bit. Yeah, the rye is just a step above. That combined toasted sweetness with the spice levels of the rye, it just gives you such a perfect balance. It's, you know, it's pretty much why I love toasted ryes over toasted bourbons for the most part. But this toasted bourbon, I think, is actually really good. Now, again, it falls in a weird category because I think it's more geared towards a beginner to intermediate type of palate, but I still think that because of the popularity of this bottle, people will be chasing after it and sometimes overpaying for it. So let me think about this and we'll do a final breakdown. All right, guys, final breakdown for the Michter's US1 Toasted Barrel Bourbon for 2024. Price, $110 is the SRP. Secondary market or resale market value, I really do think you're gonna probably see these up around the $250 to maybe even $300 or higher, especially in the beginning. Since this is one of those bourbons that people just, whatever reason, just go a little bit crazy for because it was the first one and they like to kind of, you know, keep collecting them, I do feel like these could get even higher than that. Availability here is obviously gonna be limited, but as far as value is tricky because it's gonna be tough for people to maybe see this at retail, but if I'm talking just about retail price of $110, I think the value here, I think part of me wants to say below average, but I'm just gonna say it's even because I think that there are a lot of toasted whiskeys out there. Some of them, or most of them, are $90, or if not $100, or even more than that. So if you're getting it from Michter's, which is usually a higher price point given the Michter's name, and the fact that this was kind of the first one that was done, I think at $110, this has an even value. Most I pay here is going to be retail. I think given the proof point on here at 91.4 proof, it is one of the better toasted bourbons from Michter's I've had, especially since the last one. I think it brings a lot of great flavors, some darker flavors, but now on the flip side of that, if a lot of people or a lot of you watching aren't going to find it at retail, and that might be most likely the case, what's the ceiling for me on this? Ceiling probably $250. If you have to have one, don't pay more than $250 to get this. So if you see it and someone has it like $400 in the store, just walk on by it. Maybe $200 to $250. I'll say, you know what? I'll go in the middle. I'll say $225. Alternatives, I think we named a bunch before. We have the Elijah Craig Bourbon, even though I like this a lot better than that one, but that one's $60 versus $110, so I get that. That's 94 proof as well. As far as others, I think Penelope does a great job with their toasted whiskeys. But between Peerless, Penelope, K-Luke, and even Elijah Craig, I think those are probably the main ones that people will be able to find. All right, lastly, the recommendation is to skip a try before you buy, or buy and back it up. I think at retail, it's a definite buy. If you happen to walk into Michter's and they have this at the gift shop for $110, or it's actually usually slightly over retail because they don't want to undercut the liquor stores. But if you happen to find this at $110 or close to it, I think it's a buy. Now, secondary market value, do not pay over that $200, $225, you know, I guess threshold that I was talking about. Because again, this bottle's in a weird, you know, section of the whiskey world, because I think it's geared towards a more of a beginner palate because of the lower proof and the ultra sweet flavors. But I also think that whiskey enthusiasts might just want it to collect it, and obviously flippers are gonna flip. It's in this weird area because I think flippers know that they could get a lot for this bourbon because it's pretty sought after, especially even from bourbon enthusiasts. But if you want to buy it and you're going to drink it, $110 I think is a great price for it. That's a buy. But if you're going to overpay for this one, you might get disappointed with the lower proof point, the little bit of a drying finish it has, but I think you'll appreciate the sweet flavors. But just don't pay over about $225 for this bottle. All right, guys, hope you enjoyed the review for the new Michter's US1 Toasted Bourbon for 2024. Hope you enjoyed it. If you did, hit that subscribe button below. Please hit the like button, and if you haven't yet, follow me on Instagram. Let me know down in the comments if you'll be chasing this one, what you think of this bourbon, if you've had it in the past. And as I always say, it's not about the whiskey, it's the people you share it with. And, you know, leave some of your favorite toasted bourbons down in the comments, and maybe we'll do another video on it. So cheers. Thanks, guys. Nice. We out.